Looking for the answer. Miami sun, where I know that bitches love when it rain. My mother's son, but all my crows keep it a day. Been through the system, but I ain't tryna go through it again. Shooter on parole, and I know that you shoot it again. For the ops and their friends, I'm too real to pretend. All that time.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is having a lovely, blissful Sunday. My name is East Brave, and welcome to What the F Happened This Week. Your new home for real news with no filters, no corporate spin, and no bullshit. Every week, we break down the biggest stories in politics, pop culture, world events, and everything in between with sharp insight, raw honesty, and a perspective you won't get anywhere else. Before we get into it, I want to thank you for your support. If you enjoy the content, make sure to like, subscribe, and share our video. You can find us on YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, and TikTok. It helps our community grow and keeps independent journalists alive. I am an independent journalist, not a reporter in a corporate newsroom. Everything in today's episode is gathered from publicly available sources, credible outlets, and reputable platforms. I do my best to bring you accurate, balanced information, but if you catch anything that needs correction or clarification, feel free to drop it in the comments. All right, enough of the intro. Let's not waste any more time. Let's find out what the happened this week. For our first story, we're going to get into Sheikh Hasina's trial in 2024 Bangladesh protests. Bangladesh 2024, street erupts in chaos, student protests, ordinary citizens join, and the country is thrown into turmoil. Over 1,000 lives are lost, and the head of the government flees the capital. This is the story of Sheikh Hasina, the woman who ruled Bangladesh for 15 years and now faces one of the most shocking trials in recent history. It all began with a student protest back in July 2024. Initially, it was a fight over unfair civil service job quotas, but the unrest quickly snowballed into a nationwide movement against corruption, injustice, and political favoritism. Millions took to the streets. What started as a peaceful protest turned deadly. The government responded with brutal force. According to UN reports, security forces used lethal weapons, tear gas, drones, and even helicopters to suppress protests. Extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, and torture were widespread. The death toll up to 1,400, with thousands more injured and detained. The world watched in horror as Bangladesh spiraled into violence. On August the 5th, 2024, Sheikh Hasina fled Dhaka by helicopter, leaving the country in shock. The prime minister, who had ruled Bangladesh for 15 years, resigned, and an interim government stepped in. The streets were still tense, but the crackdown horror had already left an indelible mark on the nation. Fast forward to 2025. Sheikh Hasina is now on trial for crimes against humanity. The charges? Orchestrating a coordinated attack on unarmed citizens during the 2024 protests, using state forces and partly militants. The prosecution claims she bears command responsibility for the killings. She is currently tried in absentia, while investigators present video footage, phone records, and witness testimonies linking her to the crackdown. The UN Human Rights Office and Amnesty International are closely watching. UN investigators say there are responsible grounds to suspect crime against humanity, while Amnesty warns about fairness and human rights concern in the trial. This case is not just about Bangladesh, it is a test of accountability for leaders worldwide. If convicted, Sheikh Hasina could face life imprisonment. Politically, her ouster and trial have reshaped Bangladesh landscape. The interim government now controls a tense, fragile situation, and the people, they are left asking whether justice will be served, or whether this is a cautionary tale of power, protest, and deadly consequences. So where does that leave us with Sheikh Hasina? For 15 years, she built modern Bangladesh, mega projects, electrification, social programs, and international leaderships on climate and humanitarian crisis. Yet her legacy is quite complicated. Her consolidation of power, crackdowns on the dissent, and accusations of human rights abuse have left deep scars. Her 2025 trial is a historic moment. For supporters, it may seem like overreach. For critics, long overdue justice. Either way, it is a cautionary tale how power can both create and destroy depending on how it's wielded. Bangladesh streets were once filled with hope, then bloodshed. The trial of Sheikh Hasina continues, a nation watching, the world waiting, and history unfolding. As always, on What the F happened this week, we don't pick sides, we look at the facts, we examine the patterns, and we let you, the audience, decide. Leadership is messy, nations are messy, and sometimes the story isn't black and white. We'll keep you updated as the news story develops, because in Bangladesh, every day could change everything. All right, from one intense story to another, we've got a big, scary news out in Manhattan. This time it is hitting the sports world hard. Kris Boyd, the 29-year-old cornerback for the New York Jets, was shot in the abdomen early Sunday morning. Let's break down exactly what happened. Big, scary news out in Manhattan this past Sunday. Kris Boyd, yes, the 29-year-old cornerback for the New York Jets, was shot in the abdomen outside a high-end restaurant called Say Less in Midtown. First things first, let's send some love and prayers to Kris, his family, and his teammates. This is terrifying. Nobody should have to go through this, and for his loved ones are dealing with this unimaginable stress right now. That's real life. And that's part of what we cover on the show, not just the headlines, but the human impact behind them. Here's what we know. NYPD responds to a 911 call. They found Boyd shot. Police say the suspect isn't in custody yet. The motives? It's still unclear. Reports suggest it may have been a random attack, but some say that there is a dispute before the shooting. And let's be clear, this is not related to the July shooting at the NFL offices. That's a separate mess altogether. We're talking real time, street level, New York City chaos. Now, here's the context. Midtown Manhattan at 2 a.m. is not for the faint of heart. The streets are alive, the energy is high, and the pigeons roaming the streets of New York don't back down. They'll land on your hand if you're not paying attention. That's New York. Bold, brash, and fearless. Kris Boyd was walking into this environment, and even a pro can't escape it. He reportedly left the restaurant with a bad vibe, so always trust your instinct, right? But sometimes even doing everything right doesn't protect you from the randomness of violence. And here is where corporate meets real. The Jets confirmed his condition publicly after NYPD held back the name. The hospital, police, and the team all have protocols, but the human element. He is hurt, his family is scared, and the whole sports world is watching. That's where empathy meets reporting. Let's be honest. This is a reminder of the reality for public figures, celebrities, and athletes. Safety isn't guaranteed just because you are famous. People have this sense of entitlement, and we can blame social media. It inflates this I'm your equal mentality. What? We're shooting football players now? Because it seems that that's where we're at. Before, a celebrity could walk through Manhattan and just be admired from a distance. Now, you've got fans, strangers, and random attacks mixing in. And it's a scary thought. So, what is next? Police are investigating. Images of a possible suspects are out, and the motive remains unclear. The Jets, the league, and his teammates are rallying around him. He's reportedly starting to breathe on his own, which is small, but a huge victory. So that is the story. Real-time events, uncertainty, and a reminder, life is fragile, even for someone at the top of their game. We'll keep following updates on Kris Boyd's condition and the investigation, and for his family, keep them in your thoughts and prayers. This is their nightmare unfolding, and it's news like this that hits us differently. That's it for the story. Corporate facts, raw reality, empathy where it counts. Let's move on to the next story. This week, we need to get real here about something huge, tragic, and underreported: violence against Christians in Nigeria. And when I say huge, this isn't a protest or a minor clash. According to Watchdogs, more than 7,000 Christians have been killed so far in 2025. Yikes. Yes, that many. Now, some say that the scale of this crisis is tremendous. Let me break it down. Inter-Society, a major civil liberties organization, say that between January the 1st and August the 10th of this year, about 7,087 Christians were killed. And in the same time frame, around 7,800 Christians were abducted. That's not a few isolated attacks. That is war on faith. To make it more shocking, that works out to roughly 30 Christians' deaths per day, every day, for months. So, who is behind this violence? This isn't random crime. The culprits, extremist Islamist groups. These factions are not just fighting for land, they are targeting people for their religion. In fact, Inter-Society says about 20 jihadist-style militant groups are active in Nigeria, many operating with impunity. These aren't small gangs. Some have semi-structured chains and real reach. So here's the historical context. To understand how we got here, you have to look back from 2009 to 2025. Inter-Society estimates about 125,000 Christians have been killed in Nigeria, plus tens of thousands of Muslims too. In the broader unrest, the total close to 185,000 deaths over 15 years. That's not just a bleep, that's a full-blown historic crisis. But it's not just the deaths. According to reports, 1,100 Christian communities have been destroyed and 600 clergy have been abducted or killed. Churches burned, congregations scattered. There's nothing small scale about this. So, what is the government doing about this? They argue that this is herder farmers conflict, land poverty, resource issues, but critics say that this is not the whole story. Inter-Society accuses the government of under-responding, even complicity, failing to bring exterminist perpetrators to justice. Some officials are silent, others claim that they don't have the capacity. Meanwhile, Christians are being displaced in huge numbers. Reports suggest millions have been forced to flee their homes over time because it's not safe anymore. This isn't just a local African issue. This is a global human rights crisis. Thousands abducted, targeted because of their faith. This isn't just insecurity. This is a persecution. If the world isn't paying attention, if the pressure isn't being put onto Nigerians' government and global institution, then what are we doing? Watching from the sideline doesn't actually cut it. Now here's my take. We all serve the same God, but religion divides. I've spoken to Muslims, Catholics, Christians, Buddhists, atheists. When people start talking about God, I listen because you can feel it. You can tell when someone is real and they genuinely have a relationship with God. But the minute someone starts leading from I am Catholic or I am Muslim before they even mention God, that's a red flag for me. That's showsmanship. That's performative. To me, that's not faith. That's pretending to be close to God and not actually being close. True believer starts with God, not labels. They don't need to announce it. You might act like it, but I know when someone's not being authentic. So, what do we watch for the roads ahead? How will international bodies like UN Human Rights Organization respond? Will Western nations put pressure on Nigeria, sanctions, aid for conditions? Will Nigerian government take real steps to protect Christian communities? Will extremist groups be dismantled or will they continue to terrorize? Will the displaced Christian get real support and safety? At the end of the day, this isn't just numbers on a report. These are mothers, fathers, and children. Their faith puts a target on them. And that's not just newsworthy. It's heartbreaking. It's urgent, and it calls for action. If you believe in justice, stay loud. If you believe in humanity, stay informed. These people need more than our thoughts and prayers. They deserve our words and maybe even our outrage. That's our deep dive on Nigeria this week. Stay with us. We'll keep following this, bringing you updates, calling out the stories that need to be told. Now, here is a wild one. On September the 4th, 2025, U.S. immigration agent raided a Hyundai LG EV battery plant in Georgia. They detained 475 workers, more than 300 of them South Korean nationals. Now, months later, some are returning and the fallout is huge. So, this is what actually happened. The raid targeted a high profile battery plant under construction by Hyundai Motor Group. an LG Energy solution in Elabel, Georgia. ICE say many of the detained workers were on expired visas or visa waiver programs like ESTA or B1 that don't legally allow for construction work. According to an internal leaked ICE document, at least one detained Korean workers had a valid visa. Calling into question ICE claims that all were violating their status. Video released by ICE reportedly shows some workers shackled at the scene, hands ankled, and waists. After diplomatic pressure, South Korea negotiated a deal. 300 of the detained workers were flown home on a chartered aircraft. Now, here's the kicker. Some of those workers returned to the US and their jobs at the plant. The plant operator, HLGA Battery Co., says construction is back on track and they plan to start production in the first half of next year. Here's the ramification and risks. This isn't just about immigration enforcement, it's about foreign investment. Hyundai plant is seen as critical for EV battery production, and the raid risks chilling future investments. According to some legal experts, these workers weren't just low-level laborers. Many were highly skilled engineers and installers on short-term B1 visas brought in to set up a complex battery manufacturing system. South Korea is now reviewing possible human rights violation tied to the detention. Reports say workers were treated poorly, their rights weren't explained, and some were shackled. On top of that, there's concern about ICE enforcement's discretion. If legal workers with valid visas are being swept up, what does that mean for skilled foreign laborers in future U.S. industrial projects? And economically, this raid could slow down a major EV factory, putting US jobs and climate tech ambition at risk. Now, here's my take on power, freedom, and accountability. Look, I'm all for making America great again. That's the play. But when humans overstep, when authority flex muscles, we risk turning freedom into an illusion. Now, these were not random laborers. Many were specialized engineers building cutting edge EV tech. These were highly educated folks. You can't build a future without respecting people's dignity. If the government can pick up skilled workers, ship them out, then invite them back, that's not just enforcement, that's a mirror. Decades of survey show the world already calling Americans rude. Places like Canada, Indonesia, over half of them say it. Global trust in the US, that is a slippery slope. Actions like this confirms exactly what the world already thinks. Here, power comes before people. Law and policy, it doesn't matter. Respect is the real currency, and right now, American is spending it fast and running on empty. Now, where will it go from here? I have no idea. Will the US change visa rules to better accommodate skilled foreign labor, especially for high tech manufacturing? Will ICE face accountability or oversight for how it handled this raid? Can the US rebuild trust with Korea's investors and workers? Will there be any long term changes to immigration enforcement intersects with economic policy? Now, this isn't a sidebar story. It's a flashpoint in American future. Foreign investment, manufacturing, immigration, all colliding. The world is watching. Workers' lives are being bargained with, and every choice we make now echoes into tomorrow. Stay sharp, stay critical, and let's demand a system that works for innovation and basic human rights. Because if we don't, freedom becomes just another business cost. From power and respect to how we navigate relationships across the globe, our next story takes us north to Finland, where a new study is turning heads about workplace dating and what happens when hearts meets HR policies. Currently, there is a cultural shift that's flying under the radar, but affects every modern society. People are no longer meeting partners at work. Let's start with the numbers. A 30-year-old Finnish longitudinal study tracked about 1,010 people managed subordinates couples from 1988 to 2018. The findings are stark. Women in high-ranking roles who end workplace relationship lose about 18% in pay and often leave their position sometimes permanently. Men in similar situations see an average pay bump of 6% and usually keep or advance in their role. Now, this isn't just about money, it's about power, influence, and opportunity. Workplace romance is no longer an equal game. Now, the global trend. Workplace dating is down 50 to 70% across OECD countries over the last 15 to 20 years. OECD Employment Outlook from 2021 to 2023, people are scared of HR complaints, screenshots, and being canceled. That fear is real and measurable, and it is leading to social isolation at work. Reports shows that fewer relationships at work are tied to bigger social shifts. Finland total fertility rate has dropped from 1.87 in 2000 to 1.32 in 2023, well below the replacement level of 2.1 children per woman. Statistics Finland 2023, and it's not just Finland, Japan sits at 1.26, Germany sits at 1.31, and Italy sits at 1.24. UN World Population Prospects 2022. Mental health also suffers. Studies have shown breakups at work increases stress, burnout, job satisfaction, creating long-term effects on employees' well-being. And don't underestimate technology. Fear of digital backlash, screenshots, and social media exposure is keeping people from connecting at work. It is not just paranoia, it's measurable, real, and impacting who we date, who we marry, and ultimately whether society reproduce. So yes, this is about dating, but it's bigger than that. This is workforce, the economy, social stability, and the future of civilization. Elon Musk called it the biggest threat to civilization, population collapse. And the numbers back it up. This story may seem like a workplace trend, but it's a wake up call. If you keep letting fear, social scrutiny, and unequal power dynamic shape relationships, the long term impact will ripple through every corner of society, quietly shaping the world's future. From workplace romance shaping the future of civilization to high stake tensions on high seas, our story takes us to the UK, where a Russian submarine was spotted prowling near British waters. This isn't some Cold War throwback, it's happening right now. And it's a reminder that global power moves are very real, very close, and very dangerous. So let's break down what happened, why the UK is on high alert, and what this says about the balance of power in 2025. All right, in our next big story for this week, submarines in the neighborhood isn't just a Tom Clancy movie anymore. The UK is tracking Russian submarines right now. And this isn't some random naval flex, it's a serious signal. In October 2025, a Royal Navy shadowed a Russian Kilo class submarine along with its support tug for 72 hours. Earlier in July 2025, a helicopter and Merlin anti submarine aircraft tracked the same sub or same class through the English Channel. There are also concerns about a Yazin class nuclear submarine reportedly detected 200 miles from the UK coast. Defense Secretary John Healey has laid down a warning. The UK sees you. He said the British submarine surfaced near a Russian spy ship, loitering close to undersea infrastructure. In Parliament, Healey confirmed he changed rules of engagement so Royal Navy ships can get closer to the Russian vessels if needed. There is growing political pressure. Former defense figures are calling for expand surveillance capabilities, more ships, more subs, more tech to counter gray zone warfare. Russia is mixed with espionage, sabotage, and probing. So, why does this all matter? What this implicates is a hybrid warfare. Now, here's my take. Russia isn't just a moving metal under the sea. This is a message. They are saying, we can reach you, we can map you, we can watch you. And the UK responds, good. Shadowing, surfacing subs, tightening rules of engagement, but we can't pretend this is harmless. Human life can be expandable for our means. It's actually disgusting. Whether it's a spy submarine near our shores or skilled workers shipped away during raids, the calculus too often treats people as numbers, not lives, This isn't just strategy, this is a power control and the murky edge of modern warfare, and it's a reminder we have to care about the costs. All right. In our last final story tonight, we need to talk about something that doesn't make headlines, but it affects every single one of us and every single day: what we eat. Specifically, the rise of ultra processed foods and how they've quietly transformed our health, our budget, our communities, and even the environment. This isn't fear mongering, this is fact. In the last 70 years, we went from barely eating these foods to having them make up more than half our diet. And the science is catching up, linking ultra processed foods to heart disease, diabetes, cancer, mental health issues, and rising mortality. But this story isn't just about data, it's about us, our families, our future, and what we lost along the way. If you rewind the clock just about 100 years ago, food came from the ground, the garden, the soil, not a lab, not a factory, not a corporation. In 1925, almost 40% of Canadians and Americans grew some of their own food. Today, it's less than 1%. And in the same timeline, ultra processed food, the stuff that didn't even exist for most of human history, jumped from 5% of the diet to over 58% of all calories in North America. Now, that shift didn't happen by accident. It happened because ultra processed food became the perfect business model. Cheap ingredients, long shelf life, additives that make your brain want more, low cost at the store, high cost on your body. And here's the harsh truth: poor communities were hit first. Low income families around the world rely on UPF, which is ultra processed food. I'm going to refer UPF for short because they are cheap to make, easier to ship, and sold at a price point that fresh foods can't compete with. The World Bank has actual data showing that the rise of ultra processed food consumption is steepest in countries facing inflation, food insecurity, and poverty. People don't choose this food because they want to. They choose it because fresh food is becoming a luxury. And the cost isn't just on our health. Ultra processed food requires enormous packaging, plastic, transport emissions, and industrial energy. They are literally turning the planet into a landfill. Waste from processed food accounts for over 50% of packaging waste in Canada. Most of it ends up in landfills or oceans, not recycled. But this story is personal for me. My parents escaped war in Vietnam. When they first immigrated over into Canada, I believe that we reside in Calgary for a bit. And I just remember growing up as a kid, my mother would bring in, fresh herbs, fresh vegetable, real food that came out of the real earth from the garden that we had, and it just always brought really good memories. That garden kept us healthy, it kept us connected, and it kept us human. But over time, that garden disappeared. We replaced it with ultra processed food because that's what life became: fast, cheap, and convenient. And slowly, without realizing it, it showed up in our health many decades later. I'm actually feeling it right now. My family is feeling it, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to buy good food, trying to put real nutrients into my kids, trying to break the cycle. Because here's the question we should all be asking: if ultra processed food has only existed for about 70 years, why are we acting like it's supposed to feed all of us forever? Humans survived thousands of years on real food, real gardens, real soil, real cooking, real nourishment. And look at us now: sick, inflamed, depressed, tired, overweight, undernourished, overfed, all while the companies making this stuff make billions. So maybe it's time for us to go backwards, back to the garden, back to the soil, back to something real. Not because it's trendy, but because our bodies are begging for it. Learn how to grow something, anything: a tomato, a herb, a pepper. Start small, start cheap, start now. Because if we don't, the future is simple. We'll keep feeding our families ultra processed food, and the cost will be our health, our land, and our children. Here's the truth: The biggest story in the world are rarely the ones trending online. They are the ones affecting millions of lives quietly. The rise and fall of nations, the tension under the surface, the human stories no one amplifies because they don't sell ads. Our job here isn't to chase noise, it's to bring clarity. Real stories, real people, real stakes. Because being informed isn't just about knowing what's loud, it's about noticing what's hidden. This week showed us just how fast the world moves, from tragic violence in Nigeria to shocking events in Manhattan to workplace romance in Finland, ice raids, and global military tension in the North Sea. These stories aren't isolated, they are connected, and they remind us that every action, every choice, every decision ripples further than we realize. Stay informed, stay critical, stay compassionate, and remember, the world isn't slowing down, and neither are we. That's all for this week. Until next time. That's what the happened this week. Over and out.
Take me back to my hometown. Take me back to my loved ones. We were kids.